So yeah, man, I gotta apologize for something.
What's that?
I mean, I know it's not your birthday, so I didn't get you a card anyway.
That's okay. You still have a few days.
And wait, yeah, I don't know how to organize. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on this side of the Mississippi, hosted by two dashingly good-looking men who share the same middle name. I'm the one, the only, the kinda rusty Ryan James Kearns.
And I'm the one, the only, though we haven't really done this in quite some time, Matthew James Durzick.
And if this is your first time joining us on this show, first of all, it's called Hey, Listen to This. Second of all, hey, welcome. It's nice here. And third, essentially what we do here is every week, me and Matt, take turns picking albums that we're going to dissect head to toe. It could be for a couple different reasons. Like, the episode last week was we were discussing Charlie XCX's Brat, which is like one of the biggest albums of the summer, and I figured it would be nice for me and Matt to stretch our wings and expand our musical taste buds by dissecting such a incredibly dense and fun album.
It really is, and I was kind of taken aback by just how good it was, because once again it was a matter of mixing very insightful, thoughtful lyrics and very open exposés of oneself to a beat that's very reminiscent of not doing such lyrical depth. So again, congrats to Charlie on a very, very good album. So hopefully it remains to be a staple of the summer as it is.
I think it's going to be because, the concept of having a Brat summer is, it keeps rolling on, so...
It does.
So that, keeping that in mind, Matt, what are we talking about this week?
This week we are switching gears to talk about some rock, some DIY rock, as it were, and a band that we have both seen very recently. The band is called Future Teens, and we saw them, I want to say it was late June, at Mr. Small's Theater in Millvale, which is a suburb of Pittsburgh, and my goodness, they just absolutely took to the stage and set it on fire. They were one of the opening acts for Aaron West and the Roaring Twenties, and Aaron West did very well as well, not to take away from him. He was the headliner for a reason. But, again, Future Teens just came out with a very strong sound and a very strong performance. So I picked up a CD while I was there, and it is the album that we're talking about today, their 2017 release called Hard Feelings. And that being said, what was your reaction to seeing them live like we did?
My reaction to seeing Future Teens live, I really was taken back by the stage presence that they had. Before, going to the concert, I had checked out this album specifically. I think it could have been for a couple different reasons. I think, the most popular song that they had on Spotify came from this album, which is a good indicator for me, hey, maybe you should check out this album here. And yeah, they had a really good stage presence. They were really, I thought the main lead singer was Amy, the one guitarist, but turns out, from what I was able to tell in this specific album, that's not the case. But her crowd interaction and the way she was able to be a very authentic version of herself, I was extremely taken back by. In terms of the songs themselves, We will dive into like my feelings on the album, so I don't want to give any too much spoiler. It's too many spoilers ahead of like us talking about this album. But like they performed them well. They were definitely the best opening act of the night. I mean that's not saying much because like how can you compete? Like they were the only opening act that had like a full band. The other opening act was just like one person. So
Right. So yeah, it was a great show, and again, I think this album is a bit reflective of that. And again, not to give too much away, but what do you say we get right into it?
yeah, I'm ready to get at her. So the first track is Sleep Schedule, and I'll kick it off if you don't mind.
Go for it.
All right. So here is where I always like hearing a band live as opposed to like just checking out their recording and like what their album sounds like, because like with a band of this size, like the recording doesn't often like capture the energy and like what the band can bring to the table. Like with this track here specifically, like think about it like surface level, it's a pretty standard sounding rock track. It's not a bad track by any means. I mean the guitars sound really clean. And like in terms of like how in this track here specifically how they open it up with like some of those open chords you can hear throughout the whole thing, like I felt like that was a nice touch. There are moments where like the track does progress and it like gets a little bit more open, where it highlights more intimate moments, which is always a fun thing for me. But the one thing that I'm going to say here, and this might be my only like nitpick on the vocals throughout the whole album, is that the vocals that Daniel brings, I feel like they are a little bit flat in this specific track here. It's not the case for the rest of the album because like the vocals from here on out, they are 100% good, and I like what they bring to the table. And in terms of the lyrical front here, so the lyrics here tell the story of someone who's going through a love life crisis. So lyrics that give way to this is, it's been a while since I've attempted to forego my sleep schedule to kiss somebody new. Tonight at your place I now know what it means to feel your age. And this could be going from the mindset of like dating and like your late 20s early 30s, where like you're out of high school, you're out of college, and it's just like, oh, I'm single and I'm like kind of bouncing and I kind of feel like that loneliness, and you can really feel that. And one of my favorite lines in this track here is, replays of that moment run through my head, but I couldn't even kiss you in any of them. So like the narrator in this track here is looking back on like different moments in like this specific relationship, and he couldn't even like show affection to like a past version of his ex lover or his current lover. It's not very clear like they like if they're separated or not in this track here. But overall, like my thoughts about Sleep Schedule, it's a pretty good way to kick off like the album as a whole. I mean, you get like the pretty standard rock sounding instrumentation, but the lyrics do a good job of lifting the track up to like a different plane. However, the vocals do kind of fall a little flat here.
I'm pretty much in agreement with you on everything, but I will not necessarily defend the vocals, but try to contextualize them. Because you mentioned the lyrics and talking about sort of not also the lyrics, but also the sound of the song itself. It's a very punky type of, not to confuse it with last week's, but a little bratty song. Because a lot of the songs, if not the majority, if not the entirety of this album, seem to be written from the perspective of like high school teens. They're just sort of, spending a lot of their days thinking about love, staring at their shoes. And I feel like in a context of like that, flat vocals can kind of be gotten away with. Not like for the entirety of the album, obviously, and thankfully they don't. But I feel like something that's a little off key might sort of lend itself to the entire timbre of the album. That's kind of a defense of that, but at the same time, I completely understand where you're getting at. But the lyrics, like you mentioned, I think they do a great job of shaping a lot of the themes that this album is going to talk about. A very sort of innocent type of seeking of romance throughout the course of this song. Talking about, because it's 3 a.m. and I'm close to giving up, but then you ask if I'm leaving or not. Stuff like that where, it's presented with such a clear vision and a clear understanding of what it means to even figure out what romance is when you're in your late teens, early 20s, or even your mid 20s. So I think lyrically this track is great. Sonically, I agree with you. It's a very basic rock sound. Nothing necessarily that jumps off the page, but nothing that sours it down either. Again, very solid opening track. Not my top 3, but we'll get to those eventually.
And what I will say though about the instrumentation and what the band brings to the table, like later on, like as the album progresses, the band does flex their compositional skills in a way that they're able to get away from that cliche rock sounding instrumentation and actually bring something truly unique to the table. So again, if this is the opening track, we're both kind of I feel like we're kind of on the same, gut punch on it. Not gut punch, gut feeling where it's just this is good. It doesn't offend my ears, but it could be just maybe a hair better, but it could be for a very different reason. So, the next track.
The next track is What's My Sign Again? And sonically speaking, it's pretty much exactly the same as Sleep Schedule. There's not a whole lot of difference. It has a very basic tempo. I don't think the keys changed at all. The only thing that's really changed in this case, aside from the vocals, which I'm sure you'll talk about, are the lyrics, which are kind of in the same vein too, but they add a little bit of a nice little joke about astrology in there. Because, of course, what's my sign again being the sign of the zodiac. So lyrics such as, so I look up your birthday and what it says about mine. Now I believe you that our stars were not aligned. Help, I'm getting in too deep. Yesterday I actually told somebody, because of my rising sign, now's the time to trust my instinct. It's basically saying that, maybe if I read into astrology too much, I actually might start to believe it. And disclaimer, if you do believe in astrology, cool. You do you. Am I one of those people? Not necessarily. But there is something to be said about people who do take it so seriously that it's the end-all, be-all explanation to not just their love life, but to their entire life. And it's because of that I think this song has a tongue-in-cheek way of looking at that I think is pretty strong. Once again, this song is not necessarily in my top 3 because it is just kind of, there, and there in a good way. But it is a nice little switch lyrically from the opener.
I'm right there with you. I think I like this track a little bit better than Sleep Schedule, and it's mainly because lyrically, like you addressed, it's a very tongue-in-cheek, some people try to seek meaning in the universe and they, attach themselves to various things. So, this is legitimately talking about, those people who really dive deep into, their astrological sign, their rising, their setting, their moon, their sun, all that good garbage that if you want to dive into one day, cool, you do you, like Matt said. However, outside of the lyrics, because you covered that 100% on point, I have no notes. I wrote down that the entire second verse is fantastic, and you've already touched upon that, so I ain't gonna steal your thunder. So what I will say though, about the vocals, they are a bit better on this track here, which I really did appreciate, and it could have been there was more instrumentation to complement the vocals, or just it was just a better take. So I they're not the best performance by far throughout this whole album, but the vocals did up their game. And in terms of the band itself and what they bring to the table compositionally, the one thing that really stood out to me in this track is that little bouncy guitar riff that is the main driver of the whole track. That got stuck in my head throughout the whole thing, and it was a great riff. And then even another moment talking about that bouncy riff, there's a moment in this track where you get that riff and then you get the other guitar accenting the ends of certain phrases, which I felt was a very nice touch. It when it comes to a band with two guitars, you get the lead guitar, you get the rhythm guitar. Sometimes they often one can get lost in the mix, but in this track here, they both complement each other very well. And one other moment that I did the chorus as a whole, it's big, and I like how it flows, and just overall, with What's My Sign Again, I was liking a bit more what the band was bringing to the table. Like you said, lyrically, it does elevate the game a little bit, and it feels we've taken a step up from Sleep Schedule. So yeah, I'm at this point in the review and my experience and diving into the album. I'm like, oh, okay, so it's only up from here. So if the last track was a 7, this is an 8. Maybe we're gonna get to a 20 by the end of the album.
A 20 out of 10 track. That would be, I believe that would be the Idiot Wind Award for best track on the album.
So, the next track is Girlfriend on a Gap Year. So this is where we get a change up in the vocalist here. Instead of the vocalist that we've heard throughout the whole, the first 2 tracks, I was going to say the whole album, we've only gotten we've only dabbled into the album so far, but instead of getting Daniel, we're getting Amy on this track, and I really like how her vocals sound here. No shade to Daniel, but when Amy is on the track, I feel like her vocal delivery is much better. I don't know about the band's writing style. He might be more of just writing the song structures, and might be okay, well, hey, I could sing on top of this, and she might be I'm not gonna dive into that because there's no way to determine that unless you're really close with the band, which neither of us are. But talking more specifically about this track here, so the first 2 tracks you get that more traditional rock sound. Here you get more of a stripped back feel, at least starting out, with that that simple guitar rhythm and some driving rhythms, and then so yeah, it just seems like here on the lyric front, this song is telling the experiences that someone goes through when getting ghosted by a lover. One of my favorite lines in this track here is, I want to turn the light on, but my heart's just full enough to break. And you get different moments and hints of hey, this was just a little bit of a fling, and now that we're over, now that it the fling has happened, the other person doesn't want to have anything to do with you, and you can really feel that in moments where Amy's talking about talking with her mother and hoping such and such happens. And then even on the compositional front here is I'm always a sucker for whenever bands and artists they take the moment to like hit stingers to accent certain words and certain phrases. The moment I want, like one of the moments I want to highlight here is like towards the like I think like the middle end of the track is I'm really glad you feel okay to date. Heard that he's an asshole, and like you hear like the little like as soon as you hear asshole, you hear the band doing like a couple hits, and I felt like it was great. It was a great touch because you're accenting, you're putting like the word asshole and like bold exclamation points right there. So overall, though, really like this track. Probably on the same plane of What's My Sign Again, but I did appreciate how the band was able to change gears here.
I do too, and you very much hit the nail on the head of a lot of the things I was going to say about this track, and right down to the fact I was going to use that very line about this guy who plays a sport I tried in second grade. So yeah, no, this track is a nice change of pace. You have a different key, you have a different singer. To your point about who writes what, I do have the actual like CD booklet here, and all the songs, the lyrics are written by the male singer Daniel Radine, except for track 6, which the lyrics are written by the other singer Amy Hoffman. But she does sing this song as well, and she does a good job of switching things up a little bit. I will say the first set of verses were kind of for me, not to the point of like downgrading anything, but the second verse, like you say, popped a little bit more because of that descriptive nature. And overall, the song does have a nice flow to it, a nice, like you say, stripped back rhythm. I have in my notes that it has a solid, like, Stacy's Mom vibe. So very kind of similar to that song in pace and, in a sense, attitude as well.
Yeah, and there's something to be said, like when the band does do like a lot of my favorite cuts here. Like no disrespect to like any of like the like standard rocking tracks, but like a lot of my favorite cuts on this album are like the ones that you get to strip back, feel, and like there's one track specifically that. My favorite track off the album, like that I'm gonna absolutely gush over, that everything is stripped back, but we'll get to that when we get to that. So, are you ready for to be in love or whatever?
Yes, let's talk about being in love or whatever. This song kind of goes back to the same feel that we had on both Sleep Schedule, What's My Sign Again, but it is even better than either of those two tracks. I love the opening riff. That sounds very almost like a chant in a sense, a very like post-punk type of chant, where it sounds like there's a little bit of a do along with the guitar. The lyrics themselves are great. I was kind of reminded how in the first verse it goes from at 25, not quite where I would like, to the next verse, which is 26, feels like there's some things I've missed. That's a trope that goes all the way back to the Beach Boys and When I Grow Up to Be a Man, which is a very clever way of interpreting that. And you talk on the last song about emphasizing words like asshole. On this track, when the lead singer and the entirety of the band, it seems, yells out, "Boston sucks," in a way that is almost pre-programmed to get a crowd moving, I'm just thinking, okay, they want us to know that Boston sucks. Why they want us to know Boston sucks is, again, something that you would have to be very close to the band to understand, but I'm glad they put that out there anyway. And overall, I think this is a great track about the deals and the perils of online dating, which I've done a little bit. It is very descriptive of people, putting their, thoughts out there and thinking, okay, so is this really what I want to go for? And is this really worth my time? But something's got to be worth my time at some point. I mean, I could either, stay single forever or fall in love or whatever. I think this track is fantastic, and we have reached my number 2 song on the album with In Love or Whatever.
I can definitely get behind that because, like, I really like this track as well. It didn't land in my top three, but it's going to be one that I really respect in terms of like, what it's bringing to the table. And like for you to have it as your number two, I can really get behind because like a lot of the things that you touched on, the lyrics, the Boston sucks moment, and like even like that opening guitar line, like everything complements each other so well. And I absolutely agree with you. That moment where like everything slows down and it's just like Boston sucks. Like that's a chef's kiss kind of moment. And what really drew me to this song specifically, like the instrumentation, the composition is good on its own right. However, like the the lyrics and the vocal delivery, they complement, like it's such a good package because like you said, this song is about like, just basically going through your mid 20s and the modern dating scene and being like, I could be alone or I could fall in love or whatever. Like, I just gotta like, figure something out. But like, like usually when it comes to like, people wanting to fall in love, you get like those moments of like, well, like, hey, someone's out there. When will my prince come? This is basically kind of like, whatever. I don't care. Like, this is what it is. Like, life has almost sucked the happiness and the hope and the desire for improvement out of this person. But that's complemented so well with how the band brings such fuzzy guitars and like such groovy like instrumentation to this whole track. So yeah, I'm right there with you in terms of like how awesome this song is. It probably could have cracked my top three if it wasn't for a couple of the other tracks that are coming up here relatively shortly.
Just a couple more notes on In Love or Whatever, because I do agree with you that this song does provide a great insight into the general apathy that is developed after you spend enough time on dating websites. And again, I've known this from experience. You just get to a point where it's like, what in the hell is even the point of all of this? But I do like the twist at the ending of this song where instead of it's now or never, I should fall in love or whatever, it turns into don't want to be alone forever, I should fall in love or whatever. So at that point, whatever apathy has developed, there's still that, hand reaching out into the darkness saying, no, we can do this and we should do this. So I did like that little twist at the end there too.
So the next track is Expiration Dating. And dude, I really like this song. It is such an emotional song, and the way that the lyrics hit and how the band sounds on the chorus makes for a wonderful track. So like, diving a little further in. So the way that the track kicks off with that bare guitar that just explodes into a full band sound, like, that was a good compositional flex, and it worked out so well. And like, the way that I really have enjoyed, like, listening to Future Teens and this album here specifically is, like, it's the little moments that really just elevate things to a new plane compositionally. So, like, in this track here specifically, there is a moment in the verses where how, like, the other guitar adds like little lines at the end of phrases that unless you're really zeroing in on them and you have a good quality like playback device, like you're gonna miss that. But like I love that because like for the recording not to highlight that, but for them to add that in, it's just like, hey, like here's a little like a little splash of color here. So like I really like that moment. And the chorus here is just so good, man. Like, here's the first time that we're getting both Amy and Daniel singing together. And given the lyrical nature of it, where it's just basically like, oh, hey, like, this relationship hit its expiration date. Like, for them to be complimenting each other so well on the vocal harmonies front, it works, and I absolutely love it. And then even on the lyrical front, I mean, I already like touched on that. The way I walked away from it is like this song is about like dealing with a breakup and being the one who was broken up with, where like your heart is essentially shattered. And one line that really hit for me, and for those of you who live like, well, I guess nowadays, I was gonna say in the 21st century, but like, this is just reality. Is the line that says, "Each notification I get nearly stops my heart, but none is from you." Like, we've all been there where, like, we're waiting for that text message from that significant other or that one person, and you're like, "Oh, hey." Oh, nope, that's just Facebook. Oh, hey. Nope, that's just Instagram. Oh, hey. No, that's just Raid Shadow Legends. But fantastic track here, my dude. And we've arrived at my third favorite track on the album.
I appreciate you going for that Raid Shadow Legends, buddy. I appreciate that. That threw me. I don't know how I'm going to recover from that. That was great. But no, I am right there with you 100%. And you hinted on it with that particular lyric you talked about. I think the whole song does a great job of presenting this kind of feeling of breakup, but in such a modern context. Like, you can tell these are people that have not only, have friends that have lived through this, but they've lived through this themselves. And they have a very succinct understanding of what online dating or even being in conversation with someone online is like. How every time you feel like they're about to respond to you and this conversation that's, could be turning into something in love or whatever, is very much on the fringes, and pretty much everything else feels like a jump scare. Just like, oh, this could be it. No, it's not. It's not. You hit the chorus right on the head as far as how they sound. The chorus is so powerful. Like, if there's one thing from this album, that I really get stuck in my head, it is that chorus. It is so, so good. And the lyrics, again, being clever about just the phrase alone, expiration dating. It is just a great concept, and the way that it tells a story about how, I thought you ghosted me, but realistically, I was the one who ghosted you. And now that we may have a chance, there really is no chance. Everything clicks on such a great level. And the only thing I disagree with you on is where I'm placing this song, because I have it at number 1.
I can totally respect that. And when we get to my favorite track here, eventually, I will make my defense, and I think you will. I think you might know what my favorite track is, but yeah, we'll save that for when it comes up. So, but again, like, it's good that we recognize that this is a fantastic track here. Like, this track here specifically, it's nice that we can see the band doing different degrees of, like, hey, this is such an emotional track that everyone can relate to. I mean, this album's called Hard Feelings, and, like, throughout here, there are plenty of moments where, like, you get hard feelings. Like, it's either, like, whether it's this or in love with or whatever, where it's basically not, like, a traditionally, like, hard feeling, but, like, that's more of, like, an apathetic, like, hopelessness, girlfriend on a gap year. There's plenty of moments, like, the band's really diving into, like, themes, and, like, they're executing it in different ways, which I really do appreciate. So, like, even though, like, this is, like, for a most part not like a big release or like a big recording, like, the band is doing enough work on their own and bringing enough great song structures and performances that elevate it to a new plane, man. So that being said, you ready to move on to the next track here?
Yes, the next track is Learned Behavior, and this is the only track on the album, as I alluded to earlier, where the lyrics are written by Amy Hoffman instead of Daniel Radin, or Radin. I apologize in advance if I am butchering that. But you can definitely tell that the lyrics are written by a different person on this track, because while the first half of the album very much stays in the concept of talking about dating, online dating, being in love in your 20s, or feeling the apathy towards trying to find love, this goes into a very different direction. Not so much on the being in your 20s front, but the concept of what it means, because this track more or less is about the other parts of being in your 20s, trying to find yourself and basically trying to understand if what you're doing is right or wrong and where it comes from. Lyrics such as, I'm so hard on myself while I wonder if self-loathing's learned behavior. If so, can I unlearn it too? Like, this is not about love or romance in any type of way, but it is about just trying to figure yourself out. It comes off very different from the rest of the album, but it's still a very good song nonetheless. So a bit of a slight step back from Expiration Date, but then again, when it's the best track on the album, how can you not? Again, sonically it sounds good. Amy sings very well. Not a super standout track for me, but again, a nice change of pace. It sort of reminds me, in a sense, of how we've talked before about how a lot of the albums we have today seem to fall in this old tradition of side A, side B, as if they were releasing it on vinyl. And assuming this is the opener to the second side, this sort of comes off as the sort of change of pace, or, cold splash of water back to reality, much like a Within You, Without You from Sgt. Pepper or something like that, at least in what its job is to do. So I like the song.
I don't like this song.
Oh, okay, here we go.
I was thinking about, what's the best way to, just transition from you being like, this is a step down, but, it's a good song. I'm like, nah, man, this ain't for me. So, the reason why I don't like this song, I mean, lyrically, it's still pretty good. My favorite line here is, haven't caught myself a break since I opened my eyes 25 years ago. They called me beloved, and they spelled it all wrong. I really did like the line there, especially haven't caught myself a break since being alive, essentially. And the vocals from Amy, they do sound nice, but my main beef here is I feel like the band is trying to do too much, and sometimes it just seems like they're out of pocket, and it's just the instrumentation and the vocals are like oil and water. They're not meshing together, and things don't organically always have to line up, but there was such a grind that I was experiencing here at points that I was just like, no, I can't get behind what the band's doing or what Amy's doing, because it just seems like they're on two different pages. Now, there are moments where the band does come up for air, and they kind of get into a more of a focused style, but then those moments don't last too long, because then the band goes back into trying a little bit too hard. And maybe with this track here, maybe they just needed to strip a couple elements down, or not try to do too many different things. I mean, that's basically how I walked away from it. I mean, it's not a good track in my opinion. It's not bad or awful, or get this out of my ears right now, what am I doing with my life kind of experience, but especially considering what the band's brought to the table, and just how there was such dissonance between the instrumentations and the vocals, and how it basically prevented me from enjoying the track fully. It was a bit rough for me, and this is the only track that I'm gonna mark in this album as being a least favorite. So I mean, it is my least favorite. I don't have a bottom three. This is just the bottom of the barrel.
I will agree with you on the same fact of I have a top three and a bottom one, so I'm right there with you, but this is not my bottom one, although I do understand where you're coming from as far as the not great juxtaposition between the vocals and the band itself, because it does feel like I'm trying to think how to word this properly. Like, there's a couple songs I can think of, kind of like maybe even like Born to Run, or Tom Petty's "Here Comes My Girl" comes to mind immediately, where it feels like there's this old trope of this sort of macho singer sort of almost rapping over top a basic steady beat, where they're just kind of like spewing out things. The band just sort of chugs along. I'm guessing that's what they tried to do here. And again, I didn't take as much offense to it as you did, but I did realize, and I did realize it was sort of a you know, little bit of a haphazard difference between the band. But I think the lyrics are strong enough that it saves it from being my least favorite. We will get to what that is later.
Oh, so you actually do have a least favorite here.
Oh yeah, I do. It's not like a severe least favorite, but it is a least favorite.
Oh, okay. I'm curious to see what that's going to be if it isn't like this track here. So, but moving on to talk about some party ethic, man. So after dealing with my feelings on learned behavior, like, this was swinging the momentum back into the right direction for me. I really dug how well this song did gel and has plenty going for it. So like talking about this song as a whole, like the change up from that slow arpeggiated lick to the full on jam session, like I really did appreciate that because that's a nice compositional flex. And I'm always like, as I alluded to earlier in the review, I'm always a sucker for when I hear bands hit at the ends of phrases and you hear that during the verses here. Like, that's a nice little tagline. And, like, here you get the moment where things drop down for a second and you get Amy singing lines. And I really dug the dual vocal approach here. So, like, you don't get necessarily the vocal harmonies, but you get the two vocalists, like, being featured in the track. It was a great moment. And another thing that I did like here is that opening lick that started the whole song is heard throughout the track. And, like, it almost becomes hypnotic where, like, it becomes its own feature. And in terms of on the lyrical front, not really much home to write about here for me. Like, essentially this song is about just the timing not being right within a relationship. Like, yeah. Overall, though, like, it's swinging the momentum back into the right direction for me. But we're getting back into, like, my feelings about, like, Sleep Schedule, where it's just like, this is a good track. Unlike with Sleep Schedule, like, the instrumentation didn't do enough there to highlight the instrumentation, and the vocals didn't do enough to, like, bring the track to a higher plane. With Party Ethic, I feel like the lyrics didn't do enough to bring everything to a higher plane. Everything else is super solid for me, though.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It pretty much is exactly what you said it was. A good, solid vocal back and forth between Amy and Daniel on this track. And the band does a very good job, too. And by the way, just want to shout them out real quick. Amy Hoffman on vocal and guitar, Daniel Radine on vocals, bass, and guitars, Dylan Vatikin on drums, Nick Cortese on guitars, and for 2 tracks, Gabe Goodman on synth, that being tracks 4 and 5. And again, because I have the CD here, I'm basically reading it verbatim. Don't sue me. So, this track being what it is, it's a very solid, good track. And I think the best part about it is how it does sort of steer back towards that subject of romance that we had throughout the first half of the album. But I also think the simplicity of it, because I don't think the lyrics are that great, and I think they're kind of forgettable for the most part. But I feel that it does throw the other track, the previous track, Learned Behavior, into a little bit of context. Because as someone who, has again been through the dating scene and been in conversations about relationships while also trying to maintain life in your 20s, this feels like this could almost be seen as a conversation between two people who have been going through a lot of stuff outside of their personal lives, that when they do talk about their personal lives, it has to be simplistic. It has to be sort of this sort of exasperated, no, this is what I meant to say, and you're just both out of gas, and you're just both trying to figure out the words to say. I think this track does a good job of representing that, in a sense, and this is just something I'm realizing right now as I'm talking about it. But overall, individually, this track is not a standout track. It's fine, it's solid, and I agree with you. It sort of falls in the same category as you've mentioned before. The good song bucket with songs like Sleep Schedule and What's My Sign Again.
I love how we're bringing up tropes throughout, different episodes here. I appreciate it. All right, so you ready to talk about some kissing chemistry?
Let's talk about some kissing chemistry. And once again, Amy is doing the lead vocals on this track, and dude, this track is great, man. Her vocal performance is phenomenal. I think the way she sings is very heartfelt, very passionate, not out of key, and the lyrics, very, very good in that same way too. Lines such as, I'm getting tired of just feeling okay, seems regressive, but we're better off this way. Just treat it like a mantra till my heart starts to cave. Basically, this is sort of the inverse of In Love or Whatever, where, once again, you have someone thinking, okay, this isn't working, this isn't working, this isn't working. We had a nice fling, but it didn't really work out. And at the end of the day, we just got to realize that we have to move on. We have to move on. We have to move on. Until the end of the song where she's like, actually, I'm not ready to move on at all. And the way it is presented is so strong. Again, the band sounds great. The guitar solo, I think it's a guitar solo. I mean, I don't know what else it could be. Has a nice dissonant line to it that seems a little almost jazzy in a sense. Or at very least theoretical. By when I say theoretical, I mean musically theoretical. So yeah, I dig this track a lot, and we have arrived at my third favorite track on the album.
I like this track too, man.
Glad to hear it.
Because it would have been interesting if I was just like, I don't like this track either. But no, digging into my thoughts and feelings about this track, because you touched on the lyrical front, the set of lyrics that you highlighted, that they're my favorite. That's my favorite line throughout the whole track. And the thing that I loved the most about Kiss and Chemistry is the little moments again. So starting off the track, you get the little moment where you get the opening section where you get the bear guitar doing its line, and you get Amy sounding the best she's sounded so far in the album. Not the best she's gonna sound, spoiler alert. But the after that, you get just a layer of added texture, which adds as the song builds further along, which I really did appreciate. And throughout this track, the group plays well with dynamics, and you only get that slight build only for the bottom fall out sonically. And that's a really awesome moment. It never really pops up to a huge plane. You get that higher plane at the end, but nothing really goes into a full on jam session. So for a band to flex their compositional strains to not to have that restraint and show their musical abilities in a different fashion, I always appreciate. And here's the thing that you're kind of you might scoff at, or you might be like, hey, I absolutely agree. So given the subject matter, and I really did dig the vocal harmonies that Amy and Daniel shared here, and it kind of reminded me of Fortnite by Taylor Swift featuring Post Malone. That dynamic, I felt like that was a good comparison. And like when this song does pop into its highest plane, it is so deliciously good. And another little moment that I absolutely love is at the very end. Like, you hear the band specifically pause before hitting that last note. Like, it's just moments like that. It's the tiny moments that take a great track and elevate it to an amazing track. And in terms of like where this track here lands in my hierarchy in the album, this is my second favorite track on the album. So absolutely love it. This is an absolute treat for me.
Yeah, it's a great song. It really is. And I think juxtaposition does help a little bit because it's coming off a couple songs that perhaps purposely, but do come across a little weary compared to songs like this or Expiration Dating. So again, it invokes a breath of fresh air, and again does elevate itself to those heights.
So the next track.
The next track is Giving Up on Crushes.
So this is the penultimate track on the album. I feel like I'm like, you introducing like the penultimate track, because it's usually like your word. So
yeah,
the tables have turned.
Yeah.
But no, like my thoughts on this track here, it's a very nice song, and I do like it what it brings to the table. Kind of like the last track, you get that intro with that arpeggiated guitar line, and I know when we started out this review, and I was talking about like Sleep Schedule and like how I wasn't really a fan of like Daniel's vocals, but here his voice at this point has grown on me, and he sounds good here, so I really did appreciate that. And one moment compositionally, and like what the instrumentation's doing is like it feels like the guitars. The guitars with its arpeggiated line, it's almost creating like a hill of noise, and the way that the bass is acting as like a grounding point where it's grounding that hill, like I really did appreciate that. And the way that the song builds is so focused and so purposefully, and there's a moment where it almost gives way to it could have given way to a pop, but it chooses to even build up like that tension, the dynamics even more, so it makes the payoff just worth it a little bit more. And the outro here, like I felt like that was very interesting because you just get that feeling like spiraling down a hole. Like I felt like that was an interesting recording choice. On the lyric front, this song is just basically giving up on love. Like, you get like the track earlier on in the album being like in love or whatever. This is someone just being like, hey, I'm just giving up on love. This is whatever. And like my favorite line here is, I could put up my guard, stop myself before I fall too hard. Hell, we took it too far. Who knew a crush could break your heart? Overall, this song is not my favorite in the album. I mean, we're running out of songs here in terms of like what could be my favorite song, but I did dig what the song had to bring to the table.
There are parts of it I liked, like you mentioned, that arpeggiated opening guitar riff. Very much reminded me of Semisonic's Closing Time in a sense. Like that's the song that came to mind immediately thinking about it. And overall, it does sound fine, but if I'm going to be completely honest, this is my least favorite track on the album. And the reasons for it are a little on the nitpicky side. First of all, you mentioned the vocals. I think they're a little on the sleepy side. Like, I kind of understand, like we were talking about before, how, they're trying to emote some sort of wariness in regards to situations like these. Where you're just like, if you're giving up, why not sound like you're giving up? Which I can respect that, but at the same time, they weren't necessarily my favorite vocals on the album. And also, you mentioned how the song progresses. I kind of wish that the full band intro to the song didn't go as slow as it did. Like I wish that there's a moment towards the end of the song with about maybe a minute left where you start to hear like the cymbals on the drums really go full on like crash bash, and the full band seems to be, getting into a big situation. And I wish that had happened a little earlier on the album, or excuse me, a little earlier on the song. Again, a little nitpicky, but something about this track just kind of was like, it feels a little too drifty, a little too not lackadaisical. But again, like you mentioned, and I appreciate you putting into context, that because of the subject matter, maybe that's what they were going for. The sort of feeling of giving up, going adrift into the waters of being single, and just giving up. So I think this is a solid track, but among the 10, it is number 10.
I can get behind that. I mean, I think I was just kind of. I don't know if it might have been my mood or anything like that, but I did appreciate what this track brought to the table. But I can understand your feelings about it. So, you ready to close her out?
Let's close it out with DTFL. And if you're wondering what DTFL is standing for, it means Down to Fall in Love. And this track is probably the most stripped down of any track on the album, because it's pretty much nothing more than Amy Hoffman's vocals and guitar. And it's a very good song, because I would probably say that this vocal performance is as good, if not slightly better, than Kissing Chemistry. Her vocals are just so deep and heartfelt on this track that it's a standout performance. My caveats with this track, however, the reason it's not in my top 3, if I had to rank this 1 through 10, this would probably be number 4, is because I think the lyrics, and again, the lyrics have a right to be wary, and again, the band has a right to put them out that way. But it just feels like the lyrics are in the same category as they were with Party Ethic. Not really a whole lot to write home about. In fact, I think they're kind of clunky out of the gate, which is, I am overcaffeinated and I am aware a move is faded, but I can't seem to find the guts to make it. And, like, I don't know. I thought those lyrics were a little bit meh. The rest of the song is pretty solid in the contextualized, idea of, hey, maybe we should give this a chance after all. Maybe we should try one more time. And sort of doing for, sort of picking up where the end of Kissing Chemistry left off in that regard. So again, this is a very good album closer, a very good solid thematic ending to this ride of being in love in your 20s and perhaps still being in love, because it does end on a rather ambiguous note. Just barely missed my top 3. So the floor is yours. Explain why this is your favorite song on the album.
Well, I mean, spoiler alert, but I mean, logistically, this is the only song left on the album, and I've yet to put, I've yet to crown, the king of the hill, or the queen of the hill, or, just the champion of the album here. But yeah, easily, my favorite song on the album by a country mile. And when I did spin this album for the first time, not even for, our review purposes, but for when I wanted to check out what the band had to bring to the table, just so I can be aware of what they did before seeing them live, this is a song that really just... I don't want to use this word too, this phrase too often, because it is very cliche, but I literally felt my breath leaving my body. It literally took my breath away. So, and the song that it kind of reminded me of is off of the Boy Genius album that we did. We reviewed. Side note, if you have yet to check out that review, go check it out. We actually dived into a bunch of albums before that, but the reviews are there in our back catalog, so after you get done checking this review out, go check out that one. Those reviews, it was a great time. But the song that it reminded me off of that album was We're in Love, where Lucy Dacus is just singing by herself, such passionate lyrics. I'm gonna be honest with you. This song blows that song out of the water, because just the raw emotion that you get from Amy. And one thing I even noted, it is an incredibly brave thing for her to do, to just deliver such an impassionate vocal delivery. Not impassionate, passionate vocal delivery, just with bare guitar licks. Like, it's just the guitar is barely there, so it's just her voice. Like, you get the moment where you get that slight lift in that chorus, where she's asking the listener, hey, are you down to fall in love? Like, I'm down to fall in love with this track here. But like I can't say enough good things about it. One note that I'll put here, about the vocal performance, just to sum it up in a nutshell, is like it sounds like Amy's legitimately bleeding into the microphone vocally, and I love it just so much. And one moment that I'm going to highlight is the ending. That is it's such a great ending. And it's not what you would think that would be a more traditional ending for a song like this, but the lyrics read, "You said no hard feelings for me," as if that might make it easy, and the song just cuts. Like, it's almost like, the ending of The Sopranos, where, you don't get, a proper ending. It's just like, nope, that's it. And no notes. Like, this is a 10 out of 10 track for me. It's easily my favorite on the album by a country mile.
I can absolutely respect that. It is a tour de force vocal performance. Again, if it weren't for the lyrics, I'd probably put it in my top 3, but again, it's a track worth listening to by far. I agree with you there. And I'm very curious as to what else you're going to say about this album, because you said this song blows out We're in Love. That was your favorite song off a record you gave a 9 out of 10 to. So I'm curious as to see what you're going to say next. But for right now, we can say one thing for sure.
We did it, man.
We did it.
We discovered what hard feelings feel like.
We went back to our 20s, and boy, did this one, again, give us some hard feelings.
So, I'll go first in terms of my rating, my overall thoughts and ratings, and then I'll let you go if that's okay with you.
Go for it.
All right, so overall, I was very happy that you chose this album as, the next review that we're going to do, because, after seeing the group live, and, especially after experiencing my feelings for Down to Fall in Love, several times over and over again, I was just like, okay, what else does this band have to bring to the table? Because I wasn't familiar with the rest of the tracks nearly as much, but this album works on a couple different levels. You get moments where, a lot of the tracks can be surface level instrumentally, but the vocals and the lyrics, they work well. And then you get, some other moments where, the lyrics and the vocals maybe cannot be, they're not carrying the track nearly as well, but then you get, the instrumentation really doing its due diligence. There was the moment where you get the absolute misfire in Learned Behavior, where it just seemed like things weren't gelling, and that could be a production choice, it could be a performance choice, it could be a couple different choices in the long run. But then you get the moment where you get the very end of how Down to Fall in Love was recorded, and how I'm not gonna gush any more about that track, because I can go it could be its own podcast on me specifically talking about that confession of love. So overall though, it's not a 10 out of 10 album, because if there was 10 tracks of Down to Fall in Love, this would be an 11 out of 10 easy. I would say that this is still a great album. I'm going to give this album a solid 8 out of 10.
I'm right there with you as far as the feelings about this album. Again, this is a very good album thematically. It very much is accurate in providing a introspective look in not just what it means to be dating in your 20s, but also what it means to date in your 20s and be romantic in your 20s in the digital age. There's a lot of nice, very introspective references to, being online, looking at online dating profiles, waiting for that message, while still at the same time providing this sort of innocent look at what being in love is in your early 20s, and still having that sort of shy, like, gee, I don't know, this could be fun, but I'm not 100% sure. A lot of indecisiveness and anxiety provided throughout this entire album. And again, I can't give it a 10 out of 10 because it didn't quite have those moments that like really popped. Like, again, the songs that are great, but they didn't have that, holy crap, bang the table moment like a River off of Blue or Idiot Wind off of Blood on the Tracks. But this is still a great, great album, and I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10.
So, average our scores together, it's 8.25.
Because math.
So, my next album recommendation is going to be a very simple one. It's going to be the album Self-Help by the same group, Future Teens. Touches along like a lot of the like kind of like diving into like a similar like lyrical pool and thematical pool where it's just like more of like anxieties and living in the modern age are doing, and it brings a lot of the stuff to the same table. There's not a Down to Fall in Love in there, but it's another great album by the group, and I highly recommend it.
I want to give that album a listen for that very reason, and I know that when we saw them at Mr. Smalls, they were pushing this album quite a bit, so if they think it's good, then I would assume that it's probably in that same category. My recommendation is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to choose an album that very much touches on the same sort of lyrical in-depthness of sort of, an innocence of wanting to be in love, but also providing in a context of different. It's an album that you may not be aware of. It's called Weather Vanes by Freelance Whales. I believe it was released in 2011. It's very much of the indie scene, and there's a lot of indie-ness in there, so if you're not huge into indie rock, then maybe not for you. But I think it's a solid album that sort of goes that same direction of, this sort of down-home feeling of, being with someone and not being sure. And there's a few good songs on there. Does get a little wordy at times, I will throw that out there, but as far as a good companion piece to this album, I think that one fits quite well.
Cool. So, you have anything else to add about this album, this review as a whole, before we pivot on to our next subject material here?
Not really. All I can say is, again, I thought this album was great. I'm glad you enjoyed it too. And if you have the chance to see this band live, go do it.
Yep. Go check them out, and then honestly check out any of their material. Both me and Matt heavily recommend it, especially Hard Feelings. We both love the album. So, Matt, are you ready for our next journey here?
I am ready for our next journey, wherever it may take us.
All right. So, not going to give any context because I just want you to pick off a gut instinct. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I think I asked you if you're ready 3 times already. So, okay. So, simply, I'm going to have you pick between 2 states of where we're going to go next. We're either going to go to Missouri or we're going to go to Texas.
Oh boy, do I do it again? Because again, I'm not. You know what? I'm screw it. I'm just gonna pick it. Texas. I negged on you last time. I'm gonna go with Texas this time. I'm going with Texas.
Okay, so our next review is gonna be by an album by the band The Mountain Goats. And the album is going to be All Hail West Texas.
Oh, boy. All right. Here we go.
Oh, man. Ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't pick up what we were putting down there, that was a bait and switch pulled off perfectly here.
Yeah. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, is he going to do it again? And I'm thinking, well, if he is, might as well just embrace it. And nope, that's not what we're doing.
So, All Hail West Texas by the Mountain Goats. It's a album that's literally described as 14 songs about 7 people, 2 houses, a motorcycle, and a locked treatment facility for adolescent boys. It was released in 2002. It is John Darnielle and the Mountain Goats, most acclaimed album. And yeah, it's going to be interesting for us to dive into another singer-songwriter album, because it's compared to a couple of the last albums that we've dissected, this one's going to be extremely stripped back in comparison. So anything else to add about the bait and switch, future teens as a whole before we kick it out?
No, I'm just gonna spend some time with the Mountain Goats.
Yeah, all hail West Texas, man. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you made it to this part in the review, and if you want to help support what me and Matt do in order to make sure that we keep doing more reviews like this, the best way that you can do that is on that podcasting platform of choice that you're listening to us on right now. Give us a positive rating. Subscribe, follow, whatever action you need to do to make sure that you stay up to date with our latest episodes. If you're listening to this on the YouTubes, like every other YouTube has said on every video that they ever release, like the video, subscribe to the channel, drop a comment below on how you felt about the review. If you want to send us a request for a future episode, the way that you do that is email us at ttkListen@gmail.com. Social media links are in the description, in the episode description. But yeah, that being said, I am, for the last time in this review, I am the one, the only, the slightly less rusty now, Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one and the only and the glad to be doing this once again, Matthew James Durzik.
And I'm very glad that we're back, man. I'm sorry I kind of butchered the intro, maybe even the outro here, but I hope you're not taking any any hard feelings from it, because there's no hard feelings from me here.
Boston sucks.